Welcome every single person to another brand new video. So as most of you guys know is that from the title, in today's video what I really want to do is take a little bit of a personal step once again to talk a little bit about my journey and story with leaving the corporate world. As some of you guys know is that I made a video not that long ago called Why I Left My Corporate Job, and today's video is really going to be following up that to talk a little bit about the darker sides that I don't think a lot of people talk about that you should maybe know if you are someone that's either trying to leave your corporate job, or maybe you already left your corporate job, maybe you got fired from your corporate job, but for whatever reason, if you're someone that left your corporate job, then today's video is going to be a reflection and a more very personable touch to some of the dark sides that I ended up noticing about what I wish I knew before I quit my corporate job. And there's actually technically some good things too actually that came out of it, but it's just to talk about something on the other side. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the big idea is that it's been amazing since leaving the corporate job, and I do highly encourage a lot of people to consider it, but at the same time it's not for everyone, and I think that's something that we're also going to address in today's video. So with that being said, as always, if you guys enjoy videos like this as just a way to share support, consider smashing the like button, subscribing, hitting the bell for similar videos, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, maybe stories, or honestly just really anything, even if you wanted to say hi. It is great to hear from you guys. So with that being said, let's get this video rolling and started. So we're gonna run through a couple of bullet points, and I basically wrote some notes out here on the side. But to start with is that the first thing that I really wish I knew before I left my corporate job is really to understand that it's really not for everyone. And I think it's that a lot of times when people leave their corporate jobs, or when they think about leaving their corporate jobs, the thought about it is often very glamorized, like, oh, it's gonna be wonderful, you're getting out of your corporate, and which is true as well. But a lot of people don't also realize that it comes with a lot of toughness as well, and we're gonna talk about some of the examples about this in a little bit. But the big idea is that it's not for everyone, because not every single person has the personality type to kind of survive leaving the corporate world. You need a lot of discipline, you need to be able to be on top of everything, you need to take initiative, you need to be relatively creative, you have to have the kind of the right personality to go through a lot of difficult moments. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that not every single person makes it. And at the end of the day, even those that actually do make it when they leave their corporate jobs, sometimes it can also come with a lot of cost that starts to make people question if it's really worth it. There are some people I know that, started businesses but are now actually working in their business even more than when they were actually in their corporate jobs, or they're doing something where they kind of like, how do you say it? It's like they're doing something, but they might have lost the passion for it, but now they kind of feel like they're kind of absorbed too deep into that world to be able to make any particular changes. So the big takeaway in a sentence is that not every single person actually will make it, and even those that make it, it might come at a relative cost that might start to make people question if it was really even worth it to begin with. Now, the second point to really be able to make is that it's also really important, and I think this is something that I really wish I knew, is that it's really important that if you're going to leave your corporate job, that you have to make sure that you're leaving it for the right reasons. That's another very big point, I think, is that because sometimes, depending on the reason, and there could be so many reasons why you're thinking about leaving your corporate job. I definitely had many particular reasons when I left my corporate job, but sometimes the reason to why you're leaving your corporate job might be able to be solved by not necessarily having to quit your corporate job. So for example, let's say you're someone that maybe is thinking about it because you want more money, or because you want a change of pace, right? Sometimes it could be as simple as just going to your HR office and talking to them. Sometimes it could be as simple as just being able to go to your manager and voice that you want an opinion, or that you want a promotion, or that you want something more, or that you want a challenge. Sometimes it's really just a conversation that can make all of these changes, and so you don't necessarily have to leave your corporate job in order to be able to do that. I personally know that for me personally, on a just personal basis, I had a lot of very particular reasons why I wanted to leave. So it really made sense for me to get out of my corporate job back several years ago when I did. But I do know is that that's not something for every single person, and that for some people, especially if it's a very, very minor reason, but that maybe they feel is not necessarily that as minor as it really is, that could be something that can really be resolved by just a simple couple of steps that I think has a much easier solution than having to leave your corporate job in its entirety kind of story. Now, if by any chance you do want to know some particularly good reasons it might be to leave your corporate job, I did make another video called 5 Signs It's Time to Leave Your Job, so I highly recommend checking that video. It's going to be at the end screen on the bottom. Again, 5 signs that you should consider leaving your job, and huge thanks if you guys have checked it out, because I highly recommend it, because I think it's going to walk through and help out a lot of that stuff. Now, the next thing that I really, really wish I knew when it came to leaving my corporate job is that corporate America actually still has a lot of benefits that I think a lot of people don't talk about. I think a lot of times people criticize corporate America because of how political, how bureaucratic it is, how horrible it is, and all that stuff. And I relate to that. I mean, there's a reason I left my corporate job also as well. But there's also a lot of things that I actually do miss about my corporate job that I don't see any other video talking about. So for example, I miss a lot of the stuff related to the stability, the consistency, the peace of mind. I know that when I used to work at my corporate job, while sometimes there were a lot of boring moments, it was also relatively easy, and at least certainly compared to the entrepreneurial lifestyle, in the sense that you didn't really have to think as much. Back when I was doing stuff in the corporate world, I remember that it was very routine, very methodical, and sometimes even a little bit repetitive, but at least you had a peace of mind. You had stability. You also had a lot of perks, such as like benefits, you had guidance, you had just people to kind of look up to. You had PTOs, paid time off, so many different things, and a lot of that stuff, I really, really miss it. I think a lot of times, because doing the entrepreneurial lifestyle, you don't actually necessarily get that. I know, for example, for me, my personal story is that I quit corporate engineering in order to go into the film and events industry, and while we do have a lot of benefits from the unions that exist within the corporate, no, sorry, not the corporate, but we have a lot of unions that exist with benefits inside of the entertainment industry, at the end of the day, it doesn't really compare to a lot of the stuff I remember I used to have back in the corporate world. And I think that that's one of the biggest things is just to really value that there are some people that actually really might wish that they had the job that you currently have if you're employed in the corporate world right now. Now, I think the fourth thing that I really, really wish I knew before I left my corporate job is really about the fact that it probably will not work the way that you want it to necessarily work in many, many cases. The big idea is that the majority of startups and businesses actually struggle and don't necessarily succeed, especially in the very, very beginning. There are still reasons I do recommend people to pursue it, and I think one of them is really because of education, and there was a quote that I remember someone I think once told me, it was probably when I was just chit-chatting with an entrepreneur at a bar or something like that in New York City, which is where I'm located. But I think I remember a mentor once just told me something like, you should consider sometimes starting a business, not necessarily because you think it's going to work, but because of the sheer amount of things that you can learn and grow and the ways that you can really develop in the process and the journey of trying to be able to get there. That's why I think it's still very, very worth it. But it's also very important to note that it just, in many cases, might not go the way that you originally want it to go. And at the same time, I think that it's really important to just try to maybe just take it as a life lesson, that it's just kind of one of those things that happened, and maybe you can try to use it to pivot or just to go to do other activities if it ends up becoming that. Now, hopefully it goes according to plan and schedule and everything, but I'm saying if it doesn't, which in many cases it doesn't, it's important to have other plans put in place as well. And then probably the last thing to really, really be able to share, which is something that I actually did know at the time that I left, which is one of the reasons and things that factored into my decision. But I know it's not something that a lot of people do think about, because I still see a lot of people that are just grinding and hustling inside of their corporate jobs. And it's that if you are going to leave your corporate job, in many, many cases, depending on your life circumstance, for the majority of people, it's to really just do it sooner. Because I think a lot of times is that when you're young, it typically tends to be a lot easier. I left my corporate job at 23 years old, so I was pretty young at that time. I graduated college at 21, give about 2 years, 22, 23, I booked it out of there, basically. And I did it relatively young. I think one of the biggest motivations why I did it at such a young age was because I felt that because I was so young, that's why I say this is something that I actually did know to do, but I still see a lot of people not necessarily acting on it. It's that it was because at that time period, I was single, I didn't really go out, I worked in an all-male, relatively introverted industry, which is not necessarily bad, but for me, it just was a little bit of a difficult fit. So I didn't really have a great social life in general. Everything was really, really relatively quiet, I guess you can say. And at that time period, it just felt that there were a lot of changes that were needed. And while being a single, young, male individual with not many responsibilities, still living at home at that time period, it was worth it to make that transition. But if you are going to do it, it's just to do it sooner. Because in most cases, as you kind of grow up, you start to develop more responsibilities, your lifestyle starts to get better, and when that happens, it's also very difficult to kind of go back again. And especially voluntarily, when you realize you're living the life and everything, it's difficult to return. Even right now for me, I'm in my late 20s, and I still feel sometimes what I did back several years ago would have been a very difficult thing to do if I tried to do the same thing today, especially because of the pandemic and how much my specific industry changed. That makes it even more true than ever than before. So with that being said, was it really worth it? It's really hard to kind of gauge, but I would say so. Was it worth it to make these changes? I kind of want to make another video maybe dedicated to that, so definitely consider subscribing if that is something of interest. But I personally think it was really worth it, but it definitely was not easy. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways to really also know from this particular episode and video. So with that being said, if you guys made it to the end, thank you guys so much for watching all the way through. Consider subscribing, hitting the bell. Remember to smash the like button. Feel free to comment any questions, thoughts, maybe especially if you made it to the end. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, stay employed, or stay active, and really think about what you're doing if you're going to leave your employment or situation. But regardless, hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.